I discovered some photos of a baby in a coffin, and I didn't know what that was. The two women particularly that I went to high school with were involved with each other, but one of them also flirted with me. I was attracted to boys. I didn't know how to make myself attractive to them. Not anything I could have ever done. It just simply did not come from me. Didn't even know that was a possibility. Thought that was my only option. Okay, I can be gay and I can be Christian. We can work this out. It's good.
Welcome to Pure Passion. I'm Stacia Freeman, and I'm your host for today's program. Over the past few decades, studies have repeatedly shown that only 1 to 3% of the population is homosexual. That includes studies from the ultra-liberal Alan Guttmacher Institute and the University of Chicago, to the National Opinion Research Center, and even reports published in Science magazine on studies done in France. Today, we're going to feature the testimony of one such lady, who as she grew up developed feelings of being different and found that her attractions were as often focused on girls as they were on boys. Pamela will take us inside the interior world of a young girl who is developing such feelings and show us what it is like to be drawn into the gay lifestyle in spite of her hopes and dreams to just be normal. Pamela will also share the difference that Jesus Christ can make in the life of someone who has made all the wrong choices. You may not struggle with homosexual confusion, but I think you may find yourself in parts of Pamela's story along the way. Let's listen in.
It was just right at that critical time in my life when I know that I was changing bodily in every other way. My mind was changing. I was just at that wonderful pubescent stage. And as I approached that age, I began to realize just how different I was from the other girls. They were sophisticated. They were confident. They were capable in ways that I just simply was not. They dated boys. I wanted to date boys. I was asked out maybe once in my junior high years and started meeting some new friends, some female friends at school who were in a lesbian relationship. But I didn't realize that because I didn't know what that meant. So about 13, 14 is when I started to recognize that the girls were maybe a little more emotionally attached than I realized, and that had moved into a place of sexual involvement. So, unfortunately, also my church group, the girls were experimenting in that area of sexual involvement, definitely emotional. There was dependence going on, and I fell right into that because I just wasn't sure who I was. I think that was the biggest thing. My father was working a lot. My mother, she took care of the house. She was the homemaker, the typical Beaver Cleaver type of family. My brother was about 6 years younger, so he didn't come along until I was almost 6 years old. When he was born, I recognized that my parents had a different attitude toward him, but I wasn't sure what that was all about. When I would say even probably close to the same age, right around 12 years old, I discovered some photos of a baby in a coffin, and I didn't know what that was. So I took them to my mother and asked her about them and found out that was my older brother. He had only survived 5 days. He was not ever even brought home from the hospital. And so I recognized that in my parents' hearts, although I was the oldest living child, I was not the oldest child. And the other one had been a boy. So they were keeping this, not necessarily from me, but they just weren't bringing it up. And so what had happened throughout all that time was I think my parents were trying to cope. My mother was in deep depression for many years that she has only recently started talking about. My father was an ex-POW out of the Korean War, so he had those issues. He had also been adopted, so he was actively pursuing finding his real parents. They had many personal things I knew nothing about. I was just going along with life and pretty much staying isolated and away from them and doing what I wanted to do, without much regard for their feelings, quite frankly. When my brother was born, I think they had a lot of time to heal. So I think there was an attachment and a detachment a little bit going on with my family that I wasn't aware of until later in life. The two women particularly that I went to high school with were involved with each other, but one of them also flirted with me, which of course messed me up a lot. I can recall going to see movies with the two of them and maybe another friend, and we would sit with the one young woman in the middle, her girlfriend on the other side, and me on this other side. She would hold my hand underneath the seats, the movie seats, and things like that. Just that terrible mixed message, which, yes, definitely, I started to question who I was, my own lesbian identity. What I felt was almost an elation. It was an excitement. There was certainly a physical reaction. Probably not so much sexual, but definitely a physical reaction. I felt the tenderness. I felt the touch of another woman, which was almost more than I could handle. But I also knew maybe deep in my heart that she wasn't really available. So I left that just kind of a little secret between us. But it certainly awakened the desires that shouldn't have been awakened at that time. My feelings for her took a long time to go away. When I got to college, it was the same. I still had all the same confusion. It just intensified. Because here we were in an all-girls dorm. It was a church-related school, so very small. We were in an all-girls dorm, and so you're in close proximity with women, again, some of whom I knew well from the church, some even from high school, and so I already had the feelings that were confused and frustrated and whatever else that I was going through that they really brought out because they were right there. They were just a door away. I was attracted to boys. I didn't know how to make myself attractive to them. I believed that I was being attractive to young men, but somehow they didn't see me that way. So my attraction to boys was very real and yet not received well. When I really recognized that I liked boys so much, and I was following that pattern, and it wasn't being received well, I think it's when I started to recognize there was something different about me. There was something either wrong with me, or there was something that was just either I wouldn't give them what they wanted. Maybe that was sexually, maybe that was intimately, maybe that was just my personality. I understood them to some extent, but I didn't know how to relate to them as a young woman. I could understand and relate well with other women, but not with young men. So I spent a great deal of my early years in confusion.
Pure passion that beats for Christ alone. Pure passion.
Got through college. I survived that and took my first job. And that was, I worked as a house parent in a children's home. I worked in the girls section. They ranged in age, I believe, from 6 to 17. They would come into my room, some of them half-dressed, some of them, frankly, only in their underwear. And they would come in, and we would just sit and talk, and they would eat popcorn or whatever it was we did, play games, I guess. And that was not how I'd grown up. So I was being innovated and really influenced by some young women who suddenly were putting themselves in a position, I thought. Maybe they were just being themselves, but for me it was a terrible place to put me. I eventually got involved with one of the young women there, who was not necessarily one of the ones who was flaunting her body, but just one of the young women. That led to a relationship that started in November of 1978. And after that, I was convicted, I think. I didn't quite know what to do with all that. It was too much. It was too wrong. It felt too wrong. And at some point I confessed. And the next day I was let go. Unfortunately, that didn't end that relationship. And that continued. We did some felonious things. I ended up taking her across state lines. She was a ward of the state. I took her across state lines, and thanks to my parents and to a few forgiving people, I suppose, I was not taken to jail immediately. In fact, I never spent a day in jail over that or anything else. So that ended, I suppose, well, if you would call well, being with her. But I don't know if that's what I would call well. I got what I wanted. And from that point, we stayed together almost 3 years, in and out of different states, trying to figure out what we were doing. And I was the one holding down a job. I was the one, kind of the stable one, I suppose, because I was older and presumably more stable. In thinking back on exactly who she was in my life and who she represented, it was almost a nurturing type of thing. It was almost because she was younger, it seemed that I was taking care of her, maybe. That I was almost being not really a mother to her, but somehow she fed a part of me that was definitely, well, not right, not normal, not good, but certainly a part that was in deep need of another female who was willing to take that sexual place, I guess, that touch. I think as much as anything, it was the emotional and the touch. I'm not even sure it was the sexual, but that came with it. She and I finally ended our relationship, and from that point, from 1978 until 2000, is when I was actively living in the lifestyle, what I would call the lifestyle. I tried for a little while to leave that life, to not call myself gay, not be gay, not be involved with the friends that I was, and that worked for a short time, but not very long. I ended up going right back to the bars. In the bars, when I walked in the first time by myself, I was certain I was going to be maybe ostracized or stared at or left alone. When I walked into the bar, it was a mixed bar. It was in Colorado Springs, and so they didn't really have a women's bar, so they had mixed. But I walked in, I immediately felt comfortable. I immediately felt that even though walking in this very dark atmosphere, that I had gone home, that I was where I was supposed to be. And so I sought out the women who were there. It happened to be a night that there were some women there. They had just been playing softball, and so they were in the back drinking, and I walked back there, and they invited me into their group. It wasn't at all what I expected. It was not an ostracizing type of situation. It was a very inviting, very welcoming. There was always something going on. There was always a party. There was always a gathering. You could call up someone. Once I really got into the community and got to know people, you were never lacking for friends, people to gather with, and I think everyone was just lonely. It took a lot of years for me to finally get really fed up. I was in many failed relationships. I was in one-night stands. I was in 3.5-year relationships. I continued to look for the perfect woman, the woman who would satisfy all of my needs, because of course that's what a relationship was. I didn't understand that a relationship was supposed to be give and take, and wasn't supposed to be the same sex. In April of 2000, I reached a point of utter despair. And it got to the point of, okay, if this is the best you have for me, Lord, I'm done. I want to end my life. Something has to change. Something drastic has to happen. I got so desperate that I went to a little group of books that sat on one of my bookshelves, the few remaining surviving Christian books, and I pulled out a little book and I started reading. I went to bed and started reading. And as I read that book, it was a book by Billy Graham, and it was entitled The Secret of Happiness. And it, scoffingly, I said, you don't know what that can be. How can you possibly know? You haven't lived my life. You've had this perfect, wonderful life. And so I started reading that book, and within minutes, I could not have gotten very far into that book. I knew that the gospel was true. I knew that everything I had staked my life on before that simply was not true. And I was on my knees next to the bed, sobbing, just telling the Lord, I'm so sorry. I don't even know what I've done. I don't know how to get to you. This relationship seems so far away. And I read some more probably in the book, but I just prayed and talked to him and recognized that my life had changed.
Pure passion that beats for Christ alone. Pure passion.
Well, God's answer was to say to me, I love you. And then he said, you don't have to be gay. And I thought, well, that didn't come from me, because I sure didn't agree with that. I sure didn't believe that. And I just stopped in my tracks and I said, okay, what does that mean? What do I do with that? You're in my life, I know, but everything's coming apart. And he was just so gentle. He was so caring and so kind. He didn't preface it with, oh, you disgusting little creature, I can't believe where you've been and what you've done. What he said was, I love you. And then when he said, you don't have to be gay, I felt like 100 pounds of weight had come off of me. It was the answer I didn't know that I was looking for. I was looking for, help me with my job, help me with keeping this condo, help me with, getting a car back, help me with all of these things. And his answer was, no, let's just change something else. Let's do an amazing transformation on the inside of you, even more than what we've already done. And that's when I knew that my life was going to be quite interesting from that point on. And that moment in my life is when I recognized that something far deeper was beginning to happen. Not anything I could have ever done. It just simply did not come from me. Didn't even know that was a possibility. Thought that was my only option. Okay, I can be gay and I can be Christian. We can work this out. It's good. Did not even know. No clue at all. And I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only person who had ever gone through this experience of coming out of lesbian identification. I thought everyone else either just was, or maybe I was weird, or I didn't know. And when I moved to Lexington is when I met Melissa Freirear and sat down and talked to her and realized I was not alone. I could sit and talk to someone who said, yeah, I've been there. Oh, yeah, I used to love beer, too. Oh, yeah. Just this recognition, this awareness, you're okay, it's all right, you're in a good place, and you're not alone. And I was there a little over a year, and reached a point of brokenness that I didn't know a person could. One night, it was actually the night before I had to put my little cat down, I came completely apart and recognized deep in my soul that I had sinned against the Lord. All the things I had done in 22 years, and that was a lot. I had done just about everything wrong that you could. Even though I had hurt other people, I had hurt Him. I had hurt God. And when that truth got into the deepest part of me is when I really sobbed and sobbed. And then I heard that Billy Graham was going to be in Louisville, and I was going to move heaven and earth to get to Louisville to see Billy Graham. I didn't care if I had to walk, I was going to. My brother recognized that and gave me a little car that he had at the time that he was getting rid of, and I took that and drove up to Louisville and saw Billy Graham. And that helped me really, I think, start to recognize just how far I was coming. But this was still only about a little over a year after my transformation. So not long after that, I moved to Tallahassee, Florida. And that's where it took me just very few months to get involved in a church. And I went to the senior pastor of that church, and I told him my story. And I told him that whether I liked it or not, I thought I probably was supposed to do ministry in that town related to the sexual and relational issues of men and women, because there was nothing, absolutely nothing in Tallahassee at that time. He caught the vision and recognized that I had a story that sounded sensational and one that he wanted the church to know about. They turned out to be some of the most incredibly giving, caring, non-judging people I've ever met in my life. The ministry I have today is called Bold Appeals Ministry. I do meet with people one-on-one. I meet with anyone who really wants to talk to me. If they want to call me, if they want to email me, I can talk to them. They can come to my office. I have written a book called Hear the Cry, and I subtitled it Celebrate Freedom from Lesbianism, because I do believe there is freedom. It's not immediate, but I do believe there is freedom. For the girl who is in the lesbian lifestyle right now, the thing that I have to say, first of all, is I love you. I don't judge you. God doesn't judge you. He wants your heart. He wants to know that you want His heart, that you want that relationship. The woman struggling right now, or even not struggling, in a lesbian lifestyle has to feel some conviction, some right and wrong, especially if relationships are ending, especially if relationships are tough, especially if it just doesn't seem to quite work. That, I would say, is the first thing that I recognize. My hope didn't come from within the lifestyle. My hope came from a source that was far beyond the lifestyle. My source, of course, is Jesus Christ. And absolutely, when they meet Jesus Christ, He meets them right where they are, but He doesn't leave them there. And that was one of the coolest things I learned.
You know, we could spend hours talking about the myriad of factors and circumstances that can lead to homosexual confusion, but it is enough to know that whatever they may be in your case, or the case of your loved one, that Jesus Christ stands ready to lead you through a healing and transformation process that will turn your darkness into marvelous light. You see, He knows exactly what brought the confusion in your life, and He knows exactly what will heal those wounds and fill in those deficits. As your Creator, He can do the miraculous in and through you, but most importantly, He can fill your deep need to be loved, cherished, cleansed, and forgiven. And He's willing to do just that for you right now. Give your heart fully and completely to Jesus by first turning from your sins, whatever they may be, and trusting in Christ to save you and to heal you. He is meant to be the supreme lover of your soul. Human sexual expression is a faint image of this ultimate purpose of life, to love the one who created you, the one who died for you, the one who will never leave nor forsake you. All your hopes and dreams can be found in relationship with Him. Please come back and see us next week. I'm Stacia Freeman for Pure Passion.